Dr. Angeline Barrett here. She is Senior Lecturer in Education at Bristol University. Her research focuses on teacher professionalism and pedagogy in under-resourced contexts. Her work is underpinned by a social justice perspective, which views a good quality education as enhancing teachers' and learners' capabilities, contributing to human development and subject to public democratic debate. From this perspective, she has critiqued an overemphasis on measurable learning outcomes as an indicator of education quality. Following an ESRC postdoctoral fellowship, she has research and communications coordinator for the EdQual Research Program Consortium. In this role, she collaborated with Leon Tickley in developing a social justice framework for conceptualizing education quality. She previously led an international capacity-building partnership to strengthen research methods, teaching on doctoral programs, and currently leads a research project developing languages-supportive textbooks and teaching for secondary schools in Tanzania. Mr. Andrew Cunningham, who's sitting right here, he is pursuing a DPhil in education at St. Anthony's College in the University of Oxford. In 2006, Andrew Cunningham co-founded the Women's Institute for Secondary Education and Research in Uhuru Bay, Kenya, as the first girls' secondary boarding school and community center for development in the region. In 2011, Mr. Cunningham earned his MSc in Comparative International Education at Oxford University. Now, as a DPhil candidate, Andy's research seeks to understand local realities of school leadership for school improvement in Kenya through the use of SMS-based experiences in action research across 812 public primary schools. Throughout the last 10 years, Andrew has served as an innovative education consultant for UNICEF, the World Bank, DC Public Schools, the International Education Funders Group, World Learning, and Qatar's Education Above All Foundation on issues ranging from children's leadership in national education policy to the post-2015 development agenda for education worldwide. And lastly, Dr. James Stanfield from Newcastle University. Hopefully we can get him.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. So together with Professor James Tooley, James helped to set up the E2 West Center in 2002, which is dedicated to generating knowledge and understanding about how markets and self-organizing systems work in education, and which institutions and regulatory frameworks best allow education to flourish. Together with assisting Professor Tooley in his research around the world, James' PhD research focused on the growth of private schools for the poor in Kenya, and how this development relates to the United Nations concept of the right to education. James has recently played a leading role in setting up Solace Central, and is now working with Professor Sugata Mitra, helping to develop Solace, the school in the cloud web platform, and the concept of education as a spontaneous order. So these are our speakers. A big thank you for attending. I will just remind the audience of the format for the session. So we'll have a Q&A discussion, question and answer discussion on the panel, and then we'll leave 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So I'd like to start off with the first opening question. So how should the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, how should this goal be interpreted in the context of sustainability? And is this achievable in the foreseeable future? Ms. Barrett, would you like to take this question?
Okay, good morning. How should the Education Sustainable Development Goal be interpreted in this new era of sustainable development? In the lead up to the setting of the Sustainable Development Goals, within the field of education, there was a lot of discussion and debate about learning outcomes. And of course, as you probably all know, one of the main differences between the previous Millennium Development Goal for education and the goal that we have now is that it kicks off by focusing on learning outcomes rather than just on access to schooling. And what I want to argue is that the agenda should be broader even than that. Let's make it broader still. The relevant in learning outcomes. The relevant, I think, is supposed to mean that the learning outcomes that we are seeking to measure, that we're trying to achieve for all children, are appropriate to their age. But I think we should look at relevant in a much more broader sense and say, how are the learning outcomes that we're trying to achieve through school relevant to the 16 other Sustainable Development Goals? How are they relevant to the Sustainable Development Agenda as a whole? The indicators that have been drawn up and proposed so far by the interagency expert group working on developing indicators are focused mainly on literacy and numeracy. And I don't think there's any doubt that the data that's been gathered over the last 10 years or so on literacy and numeracy and collated at a global level has been extremely powerful in highlighting massive inequalities in terms of access to the benefit of education. Inequalities between countries as well as inequalities within countries, and inequalities that are very firmly associated with socioeconomic wealth more than anything, more strongly than any other factor. But just focusing on literacy and numeracy only gets us so far. And certainly there isn't any national government or any education ministry in the world that is only thinking about literacy and numeracy. And the other thing that we have done with the Sustainable Development Goal is it's extended the basic education cycle. So instead of just having a goal for primary education, we kick off with the first target, which is about achieving relevant learning outcomes in primary and in secondary education. And for me personally, it gets interesting when we start thinking about upper primary and we start thinking about secondary education. What is it that learners should be learning, children and students should be learning at those stages? And I'll just put forward a few kind of key ideas. So one is, we're looking at an uncertain future. Climate change and also our unstable global financial markets are creating uncertain futures. So we need people to be graduating from school with problem-solving skills, with critical thinking skills, with the flexibility, the adaptability, in order to be able to respond creatively to the changing contexts and uncertain futures. But at the same time, we need students, graduates from schools, to be able to adapt and relate knowledge to their local contexts, and to do so with reference to the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. Being able to talk about school knowledge, not just in the language of instruction, or not just using very formal registers of a language, but being able to go home and talk to anyone in their community about the knowledge that they're learning in school. To be able to translate that, to be able to communicate to the people around them about the school knowledge that they're learning. We need people to be able to have the choice to live in their home community, in their home region, or to move away, particularly for secondary school. Primary may be very much, the curriculum may be much more focused on what is local. For secondary school students' horizons are broadening. The work I've been doing in Tanzania, we've been trying to develop some learning materials that support students making a transition in the language of instruction. And some of the feedback that we got from the students when we were kind of piloting drafts of those was, we want to know about other places in Africa, which was quite interesting. Form 1 weren't actually interested. The first year of secondary school didn't seem so interested in the whole of the world, but they were very much interested in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa.